An Ethiopian manuscript does not need to contain a forbidden sentence to disturb you. It only has to preserve the warning of Jesus long enough for a modern person to realize he has been treating it like decoration. That is why this story is dangerous. The question is not whether Ethiopia kept a magical line that nobody else has. The question is much more disturbing. Why did one of the oldest Christian manuscript worlds on earth preserve the words of Jesus with such fear, such beauty, such secrecy, and such weight, while the modern world turned him into something easy to ignore? Why did monks in the highlands guard parchment like a living fire? Why did a gospel book in Guise survive in a remote monastery, while empires fell, libraries burned, and entire kingdoms forgot the language of their own prayers? And why does the warning inside those pages still feel like it is aimed straight at people living right now? People with bright screens in their hands, full schedules, empty churches, private guilt, quiet doubts, and that strange pressure in the chest that comes when life feels normal on the outside but spiritually unfinished on the inside. Stay with me, because this is not going to be a story about a secret that replaces the Bible. That would be too cheap. This is about something more uncomfortable. It is about an Ethiopian manuscript tradition that did not make Jesus smaller. It kept him dangerous. It kept him as judge, king, witness, bridegroom, door, light, and final question. And once you understand what that means, the title of this video stops sounding like hype and starts sounding like a problem. Most people in America have been handed two versions of Jesus. One is the soft picture from childhood, the harmless teacher holding a lamb, always gentle, always approving, always far enough away that he never interrupts your life. The other is the angry, weaponized Jesus used by people who want power over other people. And because both versions feel fake, millions of people simply walk away. Some become atheists. Some become tired Christians. Some still believe, but only in a quiet corner of the mind where belief does not cost anything. But then you look at Ethiopia, and the whole frame shifts. You find a Christian civilization that did not receive the faith as a modern brand or a weekend identity. It carved the faith into mountains. It sang it in an ancient liturgical language. It copied sacred books by hand on parchment. It kept gospel texts in monasteries where the book itself was treated almost like an altar. The Garima Gospels, preserved at the Abba Garima Monastery in Ethiopia, are among the oldest surviving illuminated Christian gospel books known to modern scholars. They are written in Guise, the ancient language of Ethiopian Christianity. They contain the four canonical Gospels, the same core story of Jesus that shaped the Christian world, but carried through a manuscript culture that feels almost impossible to modern people. Not disposable paper, not mass-printed pages, not a file you skim and forget. Parchment, pigment, lamp smoke, fasting, chanting, guarding, copying, reverence. When a civilization protects a text like that, you have to ask what they thought was inside it. Here's the first serious question. If those pages were only religious decoration, why guard them for centuries? If the words were only moral advice, why build a life around them? If Jesus was only a gentle teacher, why did manuscript cultures paint, preserve, hide, bind, and carry his words like the fate of the soul depended on them? The modern person hears the word manuscript and thinks of a museum object. Ethiopia forces you to think of something else. A manuscript can be a witness. It can outlive kings. It can outlive wars. It can outlive the people who tried to control the story. A manuscript does not shout. It waits. And when it waits long enough, it begins to accuse the present. The Ethiopian gospel tradition is not raising serious questions because it gives you a new Jesus nobody has ever heard of. It raises serious questions because it makes the familiar Jesus impossible to domesticate. The same Jesus who blesses the poor also says to stay awake. The same Jesus who welcomes sinners also warns that a door can close. The same Jesus who forgives also separates truth from performance. That is the part most people do not want to look at, not because they are evil, but because they are tired. They want comfort without confrontation. They want spirituality without judgment. They want a savior who understands them, but not a king who examines them. The Ethiopian manuscript world preserved the opposite pressure. It preserved the feeling that the words of Christ are not background noise. They are a summons. Imagine a monk in the highlands opening a gospel book by lamplight. Outside, the mountains are black. The wind moves against the stone. The page is not white like modern paper. It is animal skin, aged, touched by hands long dead. The letters are not casual marks. They are Gi's characters laid down by a scribe who believed writing itself could be service. The monk is not reading for entertainment. He is standing in front of a text that has judged generations before him. And then the words of Jesus appear again, not new, not invented, but terrifying because they are old and still alive. Stay awake, because you do not know when the master of the house is coming. That is the line the modern world cannot metabolize. Stay awake, not panic, not predict dates, not build charts, not sell fear. Stay awake. The final warning is not that you failed to decode a hidden calendar. The final warning is that you can be asleep while thinking you are informed. You can know religious language and still not be ready. You can own a Bible and still never be owned by the words inside it. You can watch videos about prophecy and never let prophecy touch the secret place where you make decisions. That is why this story has teeth. It is not a mystery about Ethiopia alone. Ethiopia is the doorway. The manuscript is the mirror. The reason this hits so hard is that Ethiopia sits outside the usual Western imagination. When Americans think about early Christianity, they usually picture Rome, Greece, Jerusalem, maybe Egypt if they have studied a little more. But Ethiopia interrupts the map. Ancient Axum adopted Christianity early. Ge'ez became a sacred language. Ethiopian Christianity developed a manuscript culture that preserved not only the Gospels, but a wider biblical and devotional world that many Western Christians barely know. The Ethiopian Orthodox tradition is famous for a broader canon than most churches, including books like Enoch and Jubilees that shaped the imagination of judgment, angels, rebellion, covenant, and the last things. You do not have to accept every Ethiopian tradition as equal to the Gospels to understand the point. The point is that Ethiopia kept reading Jesus inside a larger ancient world where heaven was real, judgment was real, angels were real, the unseen court was real, and human history was not random. That changes the emotional temperature of the Gospel. In the modern West, Jesus is often read through comfort. In the Ethiopian manuscript world, he is read through cosmic consequence. He is not only the one who saves the individual heart. He is the one before whom nations, powers, kings, priests, and souls are exposed. That is why the title works, and that is why the warning matters. It is not saying that one Ethiopian page suddenly proves something the entire church missed. It is saying that a manuscript tradition from Ethiopia has kept a version of Christian memory that many modern people have emotionally buried. The serious question is not whether Jesus existed. Many mainstream historians already accept that Jesus of Nazareth existed. The question is why his warning refuses to die. Why does a sentence spoken in the world of Roman roads, temple courts, oil lamps, and village weddings still feel sharper than the language of our own century? Why does stay awake feel more relevant in the age of phones than it did in the age of parchment? Why does the image of a closed door still disturb people who say they do not believe? Because the human soul understands doors. It understands missed chances. It understands the sound of being too late. It understands the horror of realizing that the decisive moment did not arrive with thunder. It arrived quietly, while everyone was busy. Stay with me because this is where the Ethiopian manuscript becomes more than an artifact. The oldest gospel manuscripts do not need to change the words to make them frightening. They only need to preserve them long enough for us to realize we have been reading them like decoration. In the gospel tradition, Jesus tells a story about young women waiting for a bridegroom with lamps. Some are ready, some are not. The shocking part is not that some people are openly wicked. The shocking part is that everyone is waiting in the same place. Everyone has a lamp. Everyone looks like they belong to the event. Everyone expects the door to open. But when the bridegroom comes, readiness is revealed. The door closes. The unready arrive later and ask to be let in. But the answer is devastating. The warning is not aimed at people who never heard the invitation. It is aimed at people who assumed the invitation was enough. That is why it cuts. It does not attack the atheist first. It attacks the religious performer first. It attacks the person who knows the words but has no oil. It attacks the person who looks prepared until the hour actually comes. Now put that warning inside an Ethiopian manuscript context. Not a plastic Bible on a shelf, not a verse on a coffee mug, a hand-copied gospel book guarded in a monastery, carried through centuries, surrounded by a culture that treated sacred text as something living. Suddenly the parable feels physical. The oil lamp is no longer just a metaphor. You can almost see the flame. You can see the keeper of the manuscript holding an actual lantern near the page. You can feel the night around him. You can understand why a people who worshipped in stone churches and mountain monasteries did not read these words as casual inspiration. They read them as preparation. And that is the part modern viewers need to hear, whether they believe or not. A civilization does not preserve warnings for centuries because warnings are pleasant. It preserves them because the alternative is worse. Forgetfulness is worse. Comfortable sleep is worse. A faith that never trembles is worse. Stop for a moment. I want to ask you something directly. Have you ever had the feeling that you are not actually rejecting God, you are rejecting the cheap versions of God that people handed you? Have you ever felt that Christianity became too loud, too political, too shallow, too commercial, and yet something about Jesus still will not leave you alone? If that is you, write warning in the comments. You do not need to explain your life. You do not need to prove anything to strangers. Just write warning, because that word is the whole point of this video. Not fear for the sake of fear. Warning as mercy. Warning as the last light before a door closes. Warning as the sound of truth refusing to flatter us. And when you write it, you may help someone else realize they are not crazy for still feeling pulled toward Christ, even after religion disappointed them. That contrast is the real viral engine of this story. It forces the viewer to feel the gap between access and attention. You do not need a monastery to be faithful, but you do need attention. You do not need geese to hear Christ, but you do need ears. You do not need to become Ethiopian Orthodox to understand the warning, but you do need to ask why those monks preserved with trembling what we often scroll past with boredom. The manuscript raises a serious question about modern Christianity, but it also raises a serious question about modern atheism. If you do not believe, you can still ask why human civilizations repeatedly treated certain words as more than words. Why did people risk preserving them? Why did scribes spend their lives copying them by hand? Why did remote monasteries become vaults of memory? Why does the figure of Jesus keep returning even in cultures that try to move beyond him? Maybe the answer is only history. Maybe it is psychology. Maybe it is beauty. But maybe there is another possibility. Maybe the warning survived because it is true. This is where many channels would tell you that the Ethiopian Manuscript contains a sentence that overturns every Bible. That is the easy route. It gets clicks, but it breaks trust. The stronger truth is that the line did not need to be hidden. The line is already there and most people still do not hear it. That is more damning. Jesus says to watch. Jesus says that not everyone who says Lord will enter. Jesus says that the hidden will be revealed. Jesus says that the nations will be gathered. Jesus says that what was done to the least was done to him. Jesus says that many will come from east and west, while others who assumed they belonged will find themselves outside. These are not comfortable lines. They are not modern self-help. They are not soft branding. They are the speech of a king who knows the human ability to fake religion until the hour of testing. The Ethiopian manuscript tradition does not make those words stranger. It makes us strange for having made them harmless. And if this is resonating with you, leave a like now. Not because a video needs a button, but because this message needs to find the people who are tired of shallow religion and shallow disbelief. There are people who will not click a sermon, but they will click a manuscript. There are people who will not listen to a preacher, but they will listen when history starts whispering from a mountain monastery. That is why this matters. The final warning becomes clearer when you understand that the Ethiopian tradition did not isolate Jesus from judgment. In much of modern religion, judgment is embarrassing. People soften it, avoid it, or weaponize it against outsiders. But in the Gospels, judgment is not merely punishment. Judgment is revelation. It is the moment when reality is no longer negotiable. The mask comes off. The hidden motive becomes visible. The false servant is seen as false. The sleeping heart is seen as sleeping. The merciful are revealed as merciful. The cruel are revealed as cruel. The prepared are revealed as prepared. The empty lamp is revealed as empty. That is why the manuscript warning is not only about the end of the world, it is about the end of pretense. Every human life has a moment when excuses stop working. Every family has truths it avoids until they erupt. Every society has debts it refuses to count until the bill arrives. Every soul has a door it assumes will stay open forever. Jesus attacks that assumption. This is why the phrase raising serious questions is not filler. It is exactly what the manuscript does. It asks whether modern people have confused delay with safety. It asks whether the silence of God has been misread as absence. It asks whether religious identity has replaced readiness. It asks whether skepticism has become a shield against disappointment rather than a search for truth. It asks whether our version of Jesus is actually Jesus or just a projection that lets us remain unchanged. And it asks one question almost nobody wants to answer. If Christ returned not as a cultural symbol, not as a political mascot, not as a soft memory from childhood, but as the living judge described in the Gospels, would we recognize him? Or would we be offended that he did not match the version we preferred? When Jesus warns people to stay awake, he is not not giving them a hobby. He is describing the moral shape of a human being. To be awake means you can still be interrupted by truth. To be asleep means truth has to become entertainment before you will look at it. That is why some people can watch a video about ancient manuscripts and feel nothing, while another person feels a sudden ache in the chest. The difference is not intelligence, it is readiness. Atheists can be awake, Christians can be asleep, church members can be asleep, scholars can be asleep. People with no formal religion can be closer to honesty than people who know every doctrine. The Ethiopian Manuscript does not flatter either side. It simply holds the words until the reader is exposed. That is what sacred texts do when they are not being used as weapons. They read the reader. Share this message with someone who needs to hear it, especially someone who thinks faith is only shallow noise now. Maybe they do not need another argument. Maybe they need to feel that the story is older, deeper, stranger, and more serious than the version they rejected. Now let us enter the final warning itself, not as a slogan, not as fear bait, as a sequence. First, Jesus warns that many will be distracted by signs and rumors, but distraction is not discernment. That is for our age. We have endless signs, endless rumors, endless predictions, endless breaking news, endless spiritual claims, endless content. The problem is not that we lack information. The problem is that information can become sleep. Second, Jesus warns that love will grow cold. That is more terrifying than war language because it is quiet. A person does not wake up one morning and announce that love is dead. It cools by degrees. A marriage becomes polite distance. A family becomes logistics. A church becomes performance. A nation becomes contempt. A soul becomes numb. Third, Jesus warns that the faithful servant is the one found doing what he was entrusted to do when the master returns. Not the one with the best theories, not the one with the loudest claims. The one found faithful. That is the pressure point. What are you doing with what you know? Then comes the door. The closed door is one of the most frightening images in the teaching of Jesus because it is not chaotic, it is not violent, it is not a battlefield, it is simply a boundary. The time for preparation becomes the time of consequence. This is where the Ethiopian manuscript image becomes unbearable. A monk holds a lamp. A page glows. A doorway of light opens in the distance. It looks beautiful, but the beauty is not safe. A doorway means entrance, but it also means exclusion. A lamp means light, but it also means oil can run out. A manuscript means revelation, but it also means responsibility. Once you have seen, you cannot return to the innocence of not knowing. That is why people avoid serious spiritual questions. They say they want evidence, but often they fear obligation. They say they want truth, but they fear the death of the old life that truth demands. The warning of Jesus preserved in the gospel tradition is not that God enjoys shutting doors. The warning is that human beings can train themselves to ignore open doors until they are closed. That is different. Mercy can be real and still be refused. Grace can be offered and still be postponed. A call can be heard and still be treated as background noise. Think of how many times you knew exactly what needed to change and delayed it. Think of the apology you did not make, the habit you did not confront, the lie you kept alive, the prayer you postponed because you assumed there would always be another night, the person you did not forgive because resentment felt powerful, the calling you buried because comfort felt safer. This is not abstract theology. This is the architecture of every human life. Delay becomes character. Character becomes destiny. That is why this Ethiopian manuscript story reaches beyond believers. Even if you strip away theology, the warning remains psychologically true. There are moments you cannot recover. There are doors that do not stay open forever. There are relationships that cannot survive endless postponement. There are consciences that become harder each time they are ignored. There are societies that decay when truth is treated as optional. Jesus speaks into that universal structure, and the manuscript preserves the voice from a world old enough to make our excuses look very young. The modern person says later. The manuscript says the lamp is burning now. The modern person says I am spiritual but not ready. The manuscript says readiness is the point. The modern person says I will deal with God when life slows down. The manuscript says the bridegroom comes at an hour you do not expect. Now here is the part that makes this more than judgment. In the Gospels, warnings are not cruelty. They are mercy before consequence. If a bridge is out and someone screams for you to stop, the scream is love. If a physician says the wound is infected, the diagnosis is not hatred. If a manuscript keeps the hard words of Jesus alive for centuries, that preservation can be an act of mercy. The warning exists because the door is still open when the warning is spoken. That is the hope. If you are hearing this now, the point is not despair. The point is response. The fact that the warning still bothers you may be evidence that something in you is not dead. Numb people do not tremble. Completely hardened people do not wrestle. If this message irritates you, convicts you, pulls at you, or makes you want to argue, that may still be a form of life. The manuscript is not only accusing you, it is calling you back to attention. The Ethiopian Manuscript raises serious questions because it stands at the intersection of beauty and demand. It is beautiful enough to attract the eye and demanding enough to disturb the soul. The glowing letters, the ancient parchment, the monastery, the lamp, the keeper, the doorway of light, all of it draws us in. But once we are in, the manuscript does not let us remain spectators. It asks what every true encounter with Jesus eventually asks. Who do you say that I am? Not your pastor, not your family, not your culture, not the internet. You. Who do you say he is when nobody is rewarding you for the answer? Who do you say he is when obedience costs more than curiosity? Who do you say he is when the door is open but not forever? This is the final shape of the warning. The manuscript does not need to reveal a new Christ. It reveals how small our Christ has become. It does not need to expose a missing verse. It exposes a missing fear of God. It does not need to announce a date. It announces a condition. The condition is sleep. The remedy is watchfulness. The evidence is your life. The question is whether you will remain entertained by ancient things or become changed by eternal things. That is the difference between a viewer and a witness. A viewer says that was interesting. A witness says I have to live differently now. So when you see that Ethiopian manuscript torn open, when you see the terrified keeper with the lantern, when you see the name of Jesus glowing on the page, understand what the image is really saying. It is not saying that Ethiopia owns Christ. It is saying that Christ cannot be contained by the small boxes we built for him. It is not saying that a monastery has replaced the gospel. It is saying that the gospel survived in places we ignored, and it returns from those places with its edge still sharp. It is not saying that you should fear ancient parchment. It is saying you should fear becoming the kind of person who can stand in front of truth and feel nothing. Look, I understand if you are hesitant to subscribe to another channel. Maybe you have clicked on too many channels that promised mystery and gave you noise. But this place is different. Here we are going to open forgotten biblical traditions, ancient manuscripts, buried testimonies, and uncomfortable questions without turning them into cheap lies. We are not here to attack faith. We are here to recover seriousness. We are here to look at what was preserved, what was ignored, what was misunderstood, and what still has the power to wake a sleeping soul. If you feel that this video found you for a reason, subscribe now. Not because I am asking for a number, but because your soul deserves a place where ancient truth is treated with reverence, and modern questions are not mocked. And before you leave, remember the warning. The door is open while the warning is being spoken. The lamp is still in your hand, the page is still glowing. Stay awake.